What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Hey, Glenn, I reckon it's time for a new ad.
Do you reckon? We just went 14 months with the old one.
We don't even have sponsors anymore, so it probably was a good thing to take it down.
I think they just got so sick of it.
Yeah. So we've decided to no longer take sponsors on the show. The main reason being it comes with a level of admin that we're just not prepared to do.
Yes.
And we want to bring you good dog training information. So there's really only two things that we're interested in telling you about before you come into the show. First one being Canine Paradigm. Glenn, hit us with the details.
Thousands of customers, mainly in Australia and in the USA. We'd love to get in other places around the world, which I think will be on the list. We've got 5-star reviews to the galore. We've had skeptics, people who just don't believe products such as Canine Paradigm can do anything for their dogs. They've tried it. They've come back and they've said it works. It's made a massive change, or it's made a mold change, or it's made a change. That was one of the things Narelle was always working towards. She makes sure she does the science. She likes to peer review everything she's trying to do as much as possible. These things aren't just done by chance. She has done a lot of work, a lot of prep getting it to where it is. Extremely proud of her for all the effort that she's put behind it. Not just because she's my wife, not just because it's our business or her business, but because it works and it's done what it says it's going to do, and it's at such a great level as well. So if you're looking for something to improve the health and well-being of your dogs, you can't go past Canine Paradigm. Check it out online, caninecerticals.com.au.
I love it. I, this year, am changing the way that I teach. I am an educator. It's what I love to do, and I've been trying to find the best way to do that. And in 2026, I'm launching a subscription service. In the past, people have had to buy my courses. You own them outright or you own them for a period. And that has been great, except that it does cut some people out because of the high price point that they can't get in on, where a subscription service allows people to come in. So if you want to check out what I'm doing this year, there's a ton of really high quality information, as well as community forums, live calls, and all that kind of stuff within the Serious Dog Business community that I've launched. There'll be links in the show notes, or you can jump onto the school platform and search Serious Dog Business. You'll find me there.
Let's just remind people that if they do want to support our show, they can head over to Patreon. We always do a wrap up at the end of the show, but Patreon keeps the lights on. If you want to support us, this is the only financial way that the Canine Paradigm gets a cash influx. Our government takes half of it, being in Australia. That's what they like to do. Nonetheless, we have exceedingly appreciated your support. People like Buffhead, the Sugar Mama, massive shout out to them because they were huge supporters of the show. And also, as I've said in my one-man band show that I did just before this, George Kittredge, loving memory of you as well. Thanks for your patronage as well.
All right, let's do it. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook. Hello, sir.
I paused for a little bit of time because I was waiting for you to say the hello, sir. Hello, sir.
People get upset at me. Bertie even told me off the other day for calling him ma'am. I was like, oh, that's what I say. I say that to everyone. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. My closest friends, I enjoy being the most formal with.
I think that's just a sign of good manners, especially when you go over to the States. You notice that there is a lot of people who call you sir and ma'am over there, and it's simply because they were raised fundamentally in a Christian society. That was a polite way of addressing people that you respect or your elders, and it was a formal, polite, societal way to address somebody. And it's not meant as a burn or an insult or anything like that, but some people take it as such. I know that ladies hate being called madame because apparently you're a head of a brothel if you get called madam or something.
Madam.
Like that. Yeah, madam.
Yeah, sure.
I've heard people say, don't ever call me madam or I'll slap your face. And I thought, yeah, well.
In the army, if you don't know what rank someone is, it's safer to call them sir than anything else, right? Like if they're not dressed in a uniform and you know they are. Have you ever heard the rebuttal when they're not a sir? It's a standard line that everybody delivers. You ever heard it?
Tell me.
I work for a living. So that's what they say. So like if you
what a burn.
You should always, yeah. So if you don't know what rank anyone is and you have to address them, typically you're then encouraged, like, be careful because you don't know who you're talking to, right? So you call them sir. But if you're not a sir, so only warrant officers and above are called sir. So like up to the rank of sergeant, you're called by your rank. But then warrant officer is a sir, and then all commissioned officers are sir. When somebody calls you sir and you're not one, the standard response is, "Oh, mate, don't call me sir. I work for a living." And that is the standard response. I don't know. That certainly predated me, and I'm positive it still gets said today, but that's the bagged line.
There were two greetings that were often told to me when I was a young bloke, and that was when somebody called you Mr. Cook, for example, and you go, "Oh, that's my dad. That's not me."
Yeah.
There was that old burner, and there was also my uncle used to say to me whenever anybody used to call him a gentleman, he goes, "That's just a flash name for a shit house."
Flash name for a shit house. Oh dear. All right. Hey, you had something to say. What's going on?
I did. I just wanted to continue on from our discussion last week. I told the story about the bear. Have you watched it yet? Have you got into it? Shame.
No way.
Shame on you.
Someday, next long airplane ride, I can investigate it.
Yeah, understandable. One of the points that I do want to make, I think we potentially should open this up to a discussion a little bit more about the perception or people's or even a dog's understanding of what punishment is, because in that episode, which is called Forks, which is episode 6 of season 2 of The Bear, when Richie gets sent to that restaurant and he's polishing forks, he originally envisages in this whole journey of what's going on around him, what just transpired, is he got sent there as punishment. He got sent there because he had a fallout with Carmen in the restaurant The Bear. He's looking at this in an angle of, this is beneath me, what a shit thing this is. And you can see like the whole lead up, as we kind of explained in the last episode, about how begrudging he is around this whole perception. But then as I revealed, he realizes that it wasn't punishment. It was that Carmen saw a side to him that he didn't see in himself. He didn't understand this because he was grieving Carmen's brother so badly. It had messed him up and had fucked him up. There were things going on in his head. And there's also a sub movie that's connected to this show called Gary, which also explains a little bit about what happened between Richie and Mikey when they were going on this road trip together. A notable mention, it's worth watching. It explains a little bit of the backstory about some of the fuckery that goes on between them. So Mikey's died. Richie's fucked up. They're all fucked up. There's a lot of shit going on. He gets sent to this restaurant. He's polishing forks. He's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's not happy about any of it. His perception is, this is punishment. I'm being punished. This is not a good life. This is not something I want right now. It transpires later on and he sees it. He feels the vision. He understands what's unfolding. He sees the magnitude of what has just happened, that his belief was misplaced. He didn't see the entire picture. How could he though? Because he wasn't seeing it with a healthy mind. He was seeing it with a cloudy mind, a mind that was tragically overloaded with a lot of shit that had just gone on. That got me thinking, as I revealed when I was watching the guys working with their dogs at Red Team, some of the dogs were doing some behaviors like they were popping their head out too early, or they were getting frustrated and trying to go active. And that's where that concept of every second counts really comes into play, because when you're marking something and you're rewarding after that, all of that matters. The sequence which you're doing these events, it all has an end game, and how you produce the ultimate type of dog and how you prepare your student for what the actual lesson is, especially when they can't speak English and they don't understand exactly what it is. They can learn English, but they can't speak it, and they've got to learn what it is that you want, and you've got to explain it through these slow, progressive sequence of events. I've seen dogs before that have viewed something that's happened because they can't play out the whole end game of what you want. They don't understand your vision yet. You understand it because you sort of began this with the end in mind. Like you're thinking, this is what I want to achieve. But how do I achieve that? I won't know until I sort of get together with my student. And then I can look at how they have prepared themselves, how they understand, what frame of mind they're in, how incremental I need to be when I'm going through this lesson plan with them. Like there's a lot of strategy that really needs to be downloaded between the two of you and feeling each other out so you can understand what it is that's trying to be achieved. And this is where a lot of confusion can creep in, especially when you're going too far in your increment sometimes, when the lesson plan isn't clear. Your student can sometimes think it's punishment, and even the teacher can think that what the student is doing is punishing to them as well. It can be that way. It could be, but it's often not. It's often that you have misplaced an understanding, and it is often that the lesson plan wasn't clear to begin with. And when I relate to that episode with Richie, he didn't understand what was going on until he himself understood it. And therefore, this is one of the big points I want to try and make here. You can try and explain something to somebody, but if they're not prepared for the explanation or the lesson, they won't see it through the lens that you're trying to generate it in until they're ready to. And then when they're ready to, finally they will have an epiphany. It's like the clouds just clear up and the blue sky suddenly blooms in front of them. They go, oh my God, I just got it. I just saw what you're trying to do. That's a wonderful thing. It's also a difficult and frustrating thing when it's happening sometimes. But nonetheless, perceived punishment may not be punishment. It may be that it's just a part of the journey that you've got to go on to build enough frustration in you to stop the behavior that you're currently doing and try an alternate behavior, only to find out that that is what is going to lead you to be reinforced.
So while you're talking, we're talking about punishment. You see me get my fingers running on the keyboard here. I feel like one of the things that's really important is like definitions. And in the dog space at the moment, punishment is a big topic. Lots of people talking about it. And that kind of always, I think it comes and goes. That's pretty normal. But I want to define it. I think that the issue is we probably have a few different definitions, and people think of them in different ways. So like off the top of my head, and what we're taught in sort of behavioral science is punishment is anything that decreases the frequency and likelihood of a behavior. But if you Google what's the definition of punishment, Encyclopedia Britannica says punishment is the imposition of an undesirable or unpleasant consequence upon an individual or group as a response to breaking a rule, norm, or law. It aims to penalize offenders, defer future wrongdoing, and reinforce societal or psychological boundaries. So the problem, I think, with that is that's a really good definition. I'm happy with that. Who am I to tell the Encyclopedia Britannica what to do? But I think that there's different categories of this kind of stuff as it relates to different things. And so from behavioral science, that's where we kind of lean on the reduces the frequency and likelihood of a behavior. But I think the term punishment has a lot of connotations that people have within themselves. Like everybody has a different reaction to that word. You and I, we would, for the most part, agree on what punishment is. I think that that word, what it means, how it makes us feel, we'd probably end up in the same camp, but maybe we would be on different sides of a very faint line. You know what I mean? And I think that everybody probably lands in their own little space in that regard, because I think, again, it's really important to sort of keep in mind that everybody's situation is different. Nobody sees anything the same as anybody else. We all look at everything from different perspectives, quite literally in terms of nobody is on the ground that you're on and has walked the life that you've had. And then metaphorically in that, you have within your mind, all of your life experiences mixed with your genetics that have turned you into you. I think sometimes when we see these arguments happening or the distinction between what punishment is and what it isn't, I think that often people can have different opinions and both be fairly right. One of the things I think is most important about it, and certainly relating to what your example with the TV show, and I'd love to get more into sort of the specifics of the dog stuff that you're talking about that you're doing with Red Team, is that I think what is designed to be punishment to one learner, or not even designed, right? Here's the thing. Let's say that there's a barrier to entry to whatever it is. And that might be in terms of what you're talking about, the greatness of what a human being can be under the tutelage of a person, right? So becoming the ultimate chef or whatever it is that happens in that show. as well as, the barrier to being a suitable detection dog that really truly can be trusted to have people's lives in its nose, and be counted on in that way. There's these barriers to entry to being those things. And to some learners, those barriers to entry are punishment because they will not get through the barrier. You will not make it through it. You will find that aversive and you will, reduce the frequency and likelihood of the behavior of trying to be successful in that space. And to another, it's a motivator, right? Like that's what pushes you through. So like a really good example, but most of the listeners probably know, my wife's a tattooist. The tattoo industry is very, very different now to when she started in it. God, I don't even know who that was, like more than 15 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, I think she started tattooing. What was typical of a tattoo apprenticeship is it is unpaid for starters, right? So you need to be a person who can afford not to be paid for the months and years that it might take for you to be able to develop an income from this. You are going to be treated quite badly by people, right? Like that is part of the apprenticeship, is enduring the difficulty of being in a shop like that where you've got a lot of different personality types and you're going to work fucking hard in the attempting to learn this skill set, and you're going to get a lot of negative feedback. You're going to have to work through that. And to many people, that literally is designed as a barrier that they don't want everybody going through. And so some people will describe their treatment as a tattoo apprentice that they never became a tattooist. They would describe their treatment as extremely punishing, right? Because it pushed them out. They didn't make it through. That reduced the frequency and likelihood of them turning up to work. Whereas others will dig and fight through that and ultimately push through to the other side. That is not punishment to them. The difficulty they face, the aversives that they overcome, then kind of end up like what we would probably put in the category of that negative reinforcement, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is where you sort of wind the dog up. You make it difficult to do the thing, make them kick it up a notch so that the way that they do the behavior is more powerful, more committed. And so to relate that back to tattooing, like that's exactly how it went for my wife, like it's fucking hard work. Like it is a difficult job physically, mentally. You need a skill set that is genetic. Like if like I could not be a tattooist, not a good one anyway, right? Like not one that people want to go to. I don't have that skill set, but I have the edge within me. You know what I mean? Like, because the same thing has happened to me in other places, right? Like there's probably nothing, there probably isn't a better example than Special Forces selection, which is designed to be this horrible experience, like highly aversive, absolutely highly aversive, that if you make it through, then you have been tested and found to be like, oh, okay, well, it will take a lot to get you to quit, or there is nothing that will make you quit, versus the person who endures that difficulty and quits because of it. And so all this waffle is to sort of bring me back around to what I think is the key piece of information whenever we're talking about punishment, is that it is relevant to the subject, right? It is relevant to the learner more than anything
Absolutely.
else.
I was going to say before when you were speaking that my understanding, the more I understand about punishment and reinforcement, is it's in the mind's eye of the beholder. You have to understand it as punishment or reinforcement, or it is neither.
Yeah, exactly. There's one place my mind always goes with this, right? It's a funny one. I'll tell a story. I may have told this on the podcast, but I used to know a guy who was a debt collector, right? And I don't mean a ruin your credit rating debt collector. I mean, I'm coming around to get the money debt collector, right? For bad people. I asked him, I was like, what's that look like, mate? How do you actually do that as a job? And he said, what I do is I knock on people's door. I had this conversation. I can remember where I was having the conversation. I had this conversation in 2003. And so this is, pre-internet being what it is and blah, blah, blah. And so he goes, well, you go around to people's house and you knock on the door. And the moment they open the door, I jab them on the nose, right? I just not that hard a hit, but just a straight jab to the nose. I don't want to break their nose, but I want their eyes watering. And he goes, then I sort of follow him in the house. I've taken what we would call in the army, I've gained the initiative. So I've taken control of the situation. And if they've got the money, I'm going to get it. I go, what? Many people fight back. He goes, oh yeah, every now and again you get someone that fights back. I was like, what do you do? He goes, mate, I just try and get back to my car. He goes, I write off the idea of trying to collect the money. That's not happening. I don't even try and win that fight. Because if you're tough enough that when you open the door, I jab you straight on the nose and you go straight to a fight, he goes, I am just trying to survive at that point. And it's sort of always, I've never forget that story, but it always, I think, relates to like so many things that we see with dogs, with people, like what will crumble one activates another. That's so important when we talk about anything that we're talking about in terms of aversives, because to some people, a straight jab to the nose is pure aversion. They will crumble in front of you. But others, that is straight activation. You have brought out a version of them that you are not going to be able to put back in the box, certainly in that situation. And we see that with dogs all the time. We see that like we see people, little dog barks at something and they get a little leash pop and they go, hey, knock it off. And the dog goes, yeah, right. I'm like, totally got it. I'll knock it off. And then you get another one there, the dog barks at something and you give it a little leash pop and it fucking redirects straight back up the line at their headler, right? And so those that probably learned at events, like no dog is likely to redirect like that without some sort of prior learning, just like no person is likely to be able to handle a straight jab to the face and then go straight at the person who's there doing it, right? Like that takes some practice. That's a person who has been hit many times and is willing to go forward. So that's my big thing. And in all of the conversations that I see around punishment, that's the thing that I see being left out the most, is that it is absolutely up to the learner to decide what is punishment and what is not. And we can usually observe that, right? Like we can usually observe the outcomes because that's what operant conditioning is. It's something happened. What's the consequence, right? Like there's an action, there's a cause. What's the effect? That's what operant conditioning is. And we get to figure out afterwards, like, oh, okay, well, it had this effect. And so it's that. But then it gets into like, really complex sort of territory where maybe there isn't a specific word to put it in the category of, right? Like as an example, one of the things I'm doing at the moment with my new dog, Sundance, is teaching him how to just be a dog around the place, right? Like how to not destroy a pillow when he walks past it. So when he picks up a pillow, I'm not at the point where I want to go to I have a whole course on punishment. And I know that if I were to do the things outlined within that course, then I would be able to decrease the frequency and likelihood of him picking up those pillows. But that's not how I want him to think about that. I want him to not have like an inhibition to doing it. I want him to think like, hey, there's no fun in that. So all I do at the moment is when he picks something up, I restrict him in place. I ask him to let go of it. I tell him he's not allowed. I wait till he does. I put it back down. Of course, what does he do? Picks it straight back up. I say, hey, no. And I wait. I don't let him have any fun with it. I make him let go of it, but I don't force it. It happens. I put it back down and then I try and move along. Maybe he picks it back up. We do it all again. Technically, I think I'm trying to reduce the frequency and likelihood of a behavior, right? And the aversive I'm giving him is I'm probably boring him pretty significantly. That's the idea. But do I get to call that punishment? Where do we put that in the categories here, right? Like what is the specific word that we put around what I'm doing? Because the aversive experience is just protracted nothing, which, we get to count as an aversive. Boredom is an aversive. But I think we are for sure too caught up in the language and the idea that like punishment is this versus you reduce the frequency and likelihood of the behavior, therefore it was punished.
Could you categorize it more so as an understanding? There's times where I've had some frank conversations with people before where rather than either one of us walking away feeling like one of us lost, we come to an understanding. Now, that might be very formal. It could be perceived aversive if people are looking at it from the outside and saying, hey, that was a very intense conversation. But now the two parties, me and them, have an understanding about territories or possessions or keepsakes or whatever it might be that we have had this understanding about. And sometimes I feel like that's something that I do with dogs as well. Rather than them feeling like I've totally lost something here, I have to shut down or I have to be nervous about doing these things, I'd rather the dog just going, all right, we have an understanding about it. Move along. This behavior is best benched and not revisited because it doesn't make my life any better. It just creates conflict. Every time that I sort of go near it, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't end well. It's just a shitty thing to do. So move along. Other people might say, yeah, Glenn, that's exactly what punishment is. And in some cases, depending on the technician who is doing it at the time, I might say, yeah, the way you're doing it is punishment. The way that I'm doing it and the relationship I have with my dog and the outcomes I have with my dog, it's more of an understanding between the two of us. Nonetheless, there's plenty of dogs that I work with and even dogs of my own where I instill, it's like a machine where you've got a red button that shuts down the machine. When you hit that button, it's an emergency situation and you want that fucking machine to shut down. Like you hit the red button, everything stops. There's certain dogs that have to have that understanding. Like when you hit that button, that's the end of it. And I would say at those times, that's a time where I want the dog to understand this is a fucking punishment and it's just not worth doing this again. I want you to stop what you are doing. I want you to stop it all. We really need to have a reset and a trajectory balance of what is going on here. There's times where I've watched people on the internet, I've even watched people debating this where they'll say, oh, I didn't like the way the trainer punished the dog. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, the dog's not punished because the dog is doing the behavior again. It's repeating the behavior. It just simply bounced straight back in the behavior again. If the dog was truly punished, the dog would not want to do that behavior again. It would think it is not worth it, is not worth the outcome. I know myself when you're talking about things being in the mind's eye of the beholder, when something that has happened to me hasn't really punished me, I will do it again because I think it's worth it. It's worth revisiting it because I'm more focused on the reward intensity on the other end of it. I'm thinking, yeah, of course I want to do this again. I'm going to say I'm not going to do it again, but I'm going to do it again. Whereas true punishment, where I've endured true punishment for something before, I've thought to myself, it is not worth it. There is no reward on the other side of this. Like what I could even consider a reward pales in comparison to what I understand as the consequence that could be inflicted upon me for continuing to do that behavior. And with certain type of dogs, we can do the whole prestige worldwide thing, agree with me, don't agree with me, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But I am telling you, for me, it has worked. It has worked for the dogs that I've trained. It has worked well for the people that I've done it with because the dog fucking understands this is not worth doing. Everything else is because it leads to a greener outcome for me. We don't have to go back there. We don't have to focus on this thing anymore. It's not about destroying the dog. It's not about the dog wobbling around on its legs and cringing and rolling over and showing its belly with its tail tucked between its leg or pissing itself or vomiting in fear. It's about the dog understanding, all right, this behavior is completely off limits, completely.
Yeah.
I want the dog to understand that. Now, sport dogs, we might say with sport dogs that, like, I want you to concentrate on something else and not be so focused on these behaviors. But there's other dogs that you've got to say to them, you're never allowed to think about this ever again. Like this is gone from your vocabulary. This has now vanished. This is a complete extinction event. This behavior has to go. Whatever reason you wanted to do it, whatever reason it felt good in the past, it is no longer part of your life going forward. For your life to remain good, you have to be on a trajectory with me. This is a partnership of everything else but that behavior. Again, it's not just launching into something that people would go, oh my God, this sounds horrible. This is just a terrible aversive that the dog has to endure. We talk about things in increments as well. This might be an incremental stage where you get to the point where the dog goes, enough. That's enough. You know, like playing a game of slaps where you're just basically going, yep, I'm out of this game. I don't want to play this anymore. I have agency over this and I'm saying it's no good. I don't want to play. Cool, good. Then we're not playing the game anymore. We're not doing the behavior anymore. It's done. It's finished. It's over. We've pressed the red button. That's it. The fucking engine shuts down and we have a think about it. But then on the other side of that, like when you're in that blankness, you have to make your student understand, all right, you've gone through this. It's very unpleasant. I didn't like doing it. You didn't like receiving it. Now let's talk about what's on the other side of that. Let me show you the other tapestry or the canvas that we can really recreate some fantastic stuff on. Let me show you how to do that. I'm not trying to fucking destroy you. I'm not trying to burn your legs out from underneath you. I'm trying to show you how fucking destructive this behavior is and it must stop. You can't do it again. It can't exist in your mind where you want to revisit this behavior again. Because I watch dogs and I have people argue this point on me where they go, yeah, I punished the dog. And I said, yeah, you didn't, mate, because the dog just went straight back and repeated the behavior. That's not punishment. The dog only wants to do the behavior again. They're going, yeah, but I corrected the dog. I pulled the chain. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I said, it's still not punishment. It's not perceived punishment. The dog doesn't understand. It can't link it to what it's doing. Or Or maybe it just hasn't had the frequency with the aversive. It may be that. But nonetheless, you've still got to look at the basis of the individual. You've still got to look at how the individual feels about this. And this is not something that can just be blanket done. You still must be in the moment with the student to say, the fuck is going on with your head right now? Where is your head at, mate? Why do you keep wanting to revisit this behavior? How do we create a process where you understand this is now linked to an aversive? And that's all I want you to do. I just want you to comprehend this is no good for me going forward. But there is other stuff that we can do together. I think one of the frustrating things is, while I'm messing around with this in my own mind, when you look at people or when you look at dogs and they kind of cling to the behavior, mate, you know that person very well. There's people that you and I have sat down and had long, drawn-out conversations about why people will circle back to a person or a relationship or to a set of circumstances, and you just ask the questions, why would you? Why would you do that? I've asked that very question to family members, to close friends, to people at work, to people I care about. And I've just said, why would you do that? Explain it to me. Because with a dog, I have to try and fish through its mind the best way I know to comprehend and draw through all my years of experience and all the ghosts of the people who have told me about this in the past. I've had to draw down on their intelligences to collectively think it's possibly one of these couple of things here. Knowing this dog, knowing what I know now, also understanding the teachings of my mentors in the past, it's probably one of these three things or two things or whatever it might be. And I need to sort of employ this technique to try and rid the dog of this burden. But with people, I can ask them the question. And you know what really is heartbreaking is when people don't know why they're doing things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just from, the genetic tragedy of their parents. I've seen generational shit before where children are prone to repeating the behavior of their shitty parents or grandparents or whatever it might be. And they don't really understand why they're doing it because they kind of, even though it brings so much fuckery to their life, it also brings tragedy and they're in such a state of conflict with it. It really is. It's such a sad and heartbreaking thing to witness.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that, there's a lot to talk about what you just said then. So I think, when people don't know why they did things, that opens some fucking cans of worms.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. There's a big esoteric conversation to have around that. There's quite interesting experiments. I can't remember all the details off the top of my head, but people who, the split brain experiments, people who have had is it called your corpus callosum cut? It's usually an epileptic thing where they can stop seizures by separating your left and right hemispheres of your brain.
Yep.
And that can result in some pretty interesting personality traits, where via communicating with someone on the left side of their brain, you can tell them to do something and then communicate with someone via the right side of their brain and ask them why they did it. I think they do that via like writing and language. I can't remember all the details. I read up on this a while ago and it kind of blew my mind, but I want to be careful that I get all the detail. They're not correct, so I won't go into detail. But basically through one way, they can tell people to get up and walk around the room and then communicating only with the other side of their brain. They ask them like, why did you do that? And they make up a bunch of bullshit.
They defend
there is a very clear reason that they did it, but that part of their psyche is unaware of that. And so they make up like a bullshit reason that they will pass a polygraph on, right? Like they're like, I just felt like walking around the room, or I thought I saw something over there, so I got up and did it, despite them just being told specifically to do it, but in a way that their two hemispheres of their brain can't communicate. I kind of hold space for that quite a bit, right? I think that what that tells us a little bit is we retrospectively give reasons for things that just happen through spontaneousness, right? Like you just do a lot of shit. You're on autopilot a lot of the time. And then you justify it afterwards. And our minds don't work in time at all the way that a clock does, Like it's not as easy to be like, linear. What happened before after that, right? Yeah. Like you can watch the second hand go around, but when you're sort of playing things out, did my reason or action, which one of those came first? Because via these experiments, they prove there's a good amount of action that then you come up with a reason for afterwards, and you don't know that that's the case. You think that you had a good reason for that action, where actually the action created the reason. So that's interesting. And I think surely dogs are the same in many ways. I think that they're on autopilot much more than they are thinking. That's certainly true for people. We are on autopilot so much more than we realize, because thinking is fucking hard, man. Like it is hard work. The example I always use when I talk about that is when I was a young digger, they tell you about like patrolling or like being the forward scout of a team moving through the jungle or wherever. They say that's the most exhausting thing that a person can do. Like patrolling is the most exhausting thing that can happen to you. It will burn you out. It is so demanding. It is so physical. You can only do it for short bursts. It's exhausting. And I've done heaps of it. And you wander around, you're like, this ain't hard. Aside from that, I'm carrying heavy shit, but I'm just moving around. Like this isn't that hard, right? But it's because it's not real. The first time I did it for real, every couple of steps, you have to make a new decision, right? So like every couple of steps, you have to look around and go, okay, if we get shot at from the front, the rear, the left, or the right, where am I going to take cover? And then you take a few more steps and you have to make those decisions again. And you have to take a few more steps and make those decisions again, all while sort of scanning, looking for where those threats could possibly come from. So you're actually thinking the whole time. That is a wild thing to do. I would challenge someone, walk down the street really thinking, right? Like walk down the street and make decisions constantly along the way, observe things and think about them rather than just be on autopilot thinking about whatever you sort of have, whatever movie is playing in your brain while you go about your normal day, and observe how hard that is to do. Now, I think that becomes very relevant to us when we then start talking about dogs, because once you make them susceptible to consequences, they start thinking, right? And that's what I think we observe quite a lot, especially in a circumstance where we do bring in punishment into a situation. We often see what people call, oh, you've shut down that dog, or like, look at the reduction in drive or whatever. But quite often what we're observing is a dog who's now thinking way more, because he goes, okay, well, I wasn't aware that I was subject to those consequences. I've just been living life, high-fiving and smacking asses, running around, having a good time. But now I'm realizing there's consequences to certain actions, and I need to be careful that I don't do that action so that I don't get that consequence. And I have to figure out along the way, like, what exactly is that action? And they've got to kind of dial that in and figure that out, because like my example with Sundance picking up the pillow, it's on my mind because I just had to do this an hour ago. I spent a good couple minutes convincing him that this was not a game we were going to play with. And he got it. And then I got to the point where he wasn't picking up that pillow. It took 2 steps. He picked up the next one. And so we're back to square one. And so, but then you can see him like having to generalize something. Yep. And he goes like, oh, right. Like, but what else is it? Like, what am I allowed to pick up? Because I'm letting him carry around a ball. So then he got to experiment. Like, is it just the ball I'm allowed to pick up? Like, what if I try to pick up this? Oh, there's a consequence. Okay. So that kind of thing, that is exhausting. That is hard work. And you get a change in behavior from the learner long before the actual consequence is well understood, because they then have to, as they're trying to learn what is the consequence and put it into the category of being well understood, there's quite a lot of figuring that out. It involves a lot of thinking, and thinking is really hard.
Just on that, mate, and that example that you used around Sundance with the toys and so forth, I feel that exposure to punishment has to be the same as exposure to learning a behavior. I feel that it needs to be incrementally managed, because if there's too many stimuli present, the dog will think, as your dog did, I'm not allowed to pick up that ball, but I'm sure I could pick up that one, and that one. Whereas if you were incrementally doing it where you just say, all right, there's a ball on the ground, you're not allowed to pick it up. Okay, let's get over that. All right, so I know I'm not allowed to pick up the ball. Then we have 2 balls on the ground or a ball and a tug, and the dog goes, okay, I know that I'm not allowed to pick up the ball, but for sure I'd be allowed to pick up the tug. Nope, not allowed to pick up the tug as well. That's part of the game. Yeah. Okay, not allowed to pick up the ball and the tug, but there's a pool noodle on the ground. I'm sure I'd be able to pick up the pool noodle. And eventually it's got to get to the stage where the dog goes, all right, how about I just don't touch anything until you tell me to? Kind of like Forrest Gump when he's putting his gun back together, and he gets to that stage where he goes, why did you put that gun back together so quickly, Gump? And he goes, because you told me to, drill sergeant. Didn't tell him to do anything else. Just put the gun back together. Not talk about shrimp with Bubba or anything else. Just put the fucking gun back together. And that's the understanding that the dog needs to get to as well, is all these things that are laying on the ground. I once held a belief in my head, in my mind's eye, that I was allowed to pick those up. That was a belief system I had because nobody ever explained the rules to me. I'm a dog after all. I can't have a verbal conversation where you come in and say, hey, don't pick that shit up off the ground. You just have to learn it by trait. You go into the building, go to touch it, you get a warning or you get a correction or whatever it might be. Then you understand, all right, cool. The ball, the tug, the pool noodle, anything that's on the ground, the safe bet is just don't touch it. And then my life doesn't turn to shit. You know, I don't get locked out. I don't get put away. I don't find myself getting put up the stairs and back into the crate again. I find that I'm allowed to get in there. Just the stuff on the ground is just part of the background noise. It's just become something that is part of the generalized environment and we move on together. And I feel that I often relate to people as being great tacticians. And when I see great tacticians in punishment as well, punishment isn't nearly as enduring as what all the mouse hearts on the internet squabble about. There's all these experts in the background who have never put their fucking hands on a problematic dog before, yet they seem to be the jury that you go before to face the gallows. And they're the worst of the people to talk about punishment. They are the absolute worst. And some of the conversations that I see, they're so diabolical with diabolical people. And the reason they're diabolical because they have no investment in it. They have no understanding of it themselves. They're just there for the sport of an argument, which is quite, for me, that is punishment in itself. For most people who have more than 2 brain cells rapidly firing around their head, for most of us, that is absolutely agonizing. That is the most aversive outcome you can have. But when you're actually seeing somebody that punishes well and you actually see a student goes, yep, I understand not to do that. Let's just move on. And then they go, cool beans, man. High five, by the way, for working that out. Let me also pay you with a reward. And then the student goes, that makes total sense to me. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Because I really didn't know that before. Nobody explained that to me. I remember there was something that you were doing. I can't remember exactly what it was. I remember you telling me the story, and it might have been Jazz or somebody else that goes, hey, Pat, you really fucked up when you did that. And you thought to yourself, well, I'm glad somebody actually told me that because nobody else did. And I would have continued along doing the behavior because nobody really corrected me or picked me up on it. And now I'm not doing the behavior anymore. We've all had those moments before where you go, I appreciate you, man. I might not have appreciated the tone or whatever way you said that to me, but I appreciate that you actually spoke up. I appreciate that you pointed it out to me because none of these other motherfuckers came forward and said anything to me, and they would have just let me career down this trajectory, committing the same behavior, getting the same outcome, creating the same frustrations, creating the same conflict with people around me because I didn't know it was a problem. Now I know it's a problem. I won't do the behavior anymore. And I feel that when we perform those justices for our dogs get on with other things, other, life-building events where they can really start taking off.
So I think we've set the stage pretty well. There's a huge online discussion happening around punishment and what it is and whatever. And while I don't want to get involved in the specifics of that online, the issue I think that we face is there's a lot of people who are watching trainers they respect or follow, and they're at odds with each other and sort of like, well, what is the answer? The issue is it's a complex answer, and so that's why typically when people have asked me, I'm sort of directing them to, like, I have a whole course on this. I can sort of give me the time to explain it to you, pay a bit of money, but give me the time to explain it to you in a way that is really well thought out and gives you all of the information and all the stepping stones along the way. But what I think we can say here, because we've said it plenty of times on the podcast in the past, is that the difference between punishment and negative reinforcement is that negative reinforcement can be escaped and then avoided. Punishment can only be avoided. And so what we're seeing when people say, well, as soon as the behavior stops, the punishment should stop, that can be true and that can work, right? Like with some dogs, as we said, that this is all specific to the learner, right? So some dogs, the level of aversive, whatever you do that is the aversive, whether that's a leash pop or a timeout, like whatever it is, whatever, if the dog goes, oh, okay, I did that thing and it led to this consequence. I don't want that consequence, so I'm not going to do that thing. So an aversive that stops the moment the behavior stops can be punishing to a dog. It can be, right? Like that dog might go, okay, that consequence was, that was too high. I'm not doing this again. Therefore, I reduce the frequency and likelihood of that behavior. That doesn't always work. And certainly with the more motivated dogs, the behavior that they might be committed to doing, there's lots of different things that can create the formula for why that might not work. But the issue can be that a dog who's given an aversive experience for having done something, if when the moment it stops doing that thing, the aversive experience stops, well, then the dog is now in control of the on and the off of the aversive experience, which turns that into negative reinforcement. So that becomes like you're driving the dog into an alternative behavior of whatever that looks like of not doing the behavior adjacent to the behavior. So like my favorite example when I talk about this, because we see this one sort of all the time, is you imagine a dog that has really good bite work, loves biting, obsessed with it, thinks it's the coolest thing ever. And that's the highest value reinforcer that dog can imagine. That's what it lives for. But also that dog has to do obedience, right? Like he's got to be able to heel. And certainly like in the game we play in PSA, we absolutely need a dog that is able to demonstrate all of its flashy, fancy obedience in the presence of a decoy. Now that decoy typically shouldn't get within 3 feet of the dog, but even 3 feet's pretty fucking close, right? Like that's a dog that might look over while he's in that heel position and go, oh, like that decoy is in range of my leash, you know, like even if he's on leash, all the tools are on, everything's controlled. Might look and be like, you know, I could do the thing that I like doing the most. I'm doing this healing and hopefully that leads to this biting, but I could just bite. I could just bite right now. And I think if you're doing this kind of training, like that's going to happen, right? Like every dog is at one point or another going to do that. And so what a lot of people would then do is the dog leaves the thing that was correct, the healing, and goes and does the thing that is incorrect, the biting. And aversive delivered in that moment might stop the dog from biting. And then the dog is highly likely when it's no longer biting to pop back into the heel position because that's where it was successful in the past. And very often in the attempts to stop the biting, the dog turns that pressure off via doing the thing that it was previously doing. And we would call that a correction in that moment, right? So the dog got corrected for doing the wrong thing and made to do the right thing. And with some dogs, that will work great. You give that dog a correction and he goes, righto, cool. I know that I was meant to be healing. I made a choice no longer to do that and I bit. Now I received an aversive stimulus for that. Now I'm back to healing. That aversive has stopped. I should heal instead. And we use negative reinforcement there, but the aversive is enough that the dog decides, well, I'm going to stay into this heal. And maybe the dog also makes the decision, oh, it happened because I bit. I'm not going to bite again. That is possible. But what also is very possible, and this is what we're trying to avoid, this is the loop that we don't want to get a dog trapped into. And this is why I think for people who haven't understood why the people on a different side of the aisle in this conversation are so upset about it and are sort of really driving this home, is there's a certain kind of dog that can really fuck themselves up doing that kind of training, right? Like they can get themselves in a really fucked up, hectic loop where they know I am doing this thing. I'm doing the healing. I really want to do the biting. The decoy gets in range. The dog flies out, does bite, gets a little bit of satisfaction, a bit of excitement from that. That's highly reinforcing, making the dog want to do that again. And then when the aversive comes, the dog then goes, okay, well, I know how to stop that aversive. And the dog bounces back into the heel position. That dog is corrected, yes, but he is not punished. It has not decreased the frequency and likelihood of him doing that again in the future. It stopped it right now. And so what that dog perhaps then thinks is he then goes, well, that was pretty fun, right? Like that is a new game that I could play. And especially if the dog is accustomed to receiving aversives or is the kind of dog that aversives are kind of difficult to do, right? Especially in that state of drive. That's certainly something that maybe many people who have very easygoing, flat dogs, that could be a really difficult thing to understand, that you have some dogs that are actually very difficult to have any sort of physical consequence truly be aversive rather than activating. That can be a really hard thing to wrap your head around if you haven't experienced one of those dogs, where that dog then goes, okay, well, I love the biting and I don't overly mind the thing you do to stop me biting. It's not the end of the world. I can turn that off whenever I want by getting back into the heel position. This feels like a really cool game that I could play. And so now we've got a dog who wants to bounce out, do the very wrong thing, knowing that when the aversive consequence comes, it will only be in the period of doing the wrong thing. And the moment it starts doing the right thing, that aversive will stop. And so knowing how to control the pressure means that the dog can start to take risks with that pressure and play with that pressure. And for sure, you get some dogs that are truly playing a game and they enjoy playing that game because the aversive is not that bad. But you get other dogs that can fuck themselves right up doing this, and they can get trapped in a loop where they are like, that aversive is highly aversive. It is stressing them out. It is a very unpleasant thing that's happening to them, but they get themselves stuck in a loop and will continue to demonstrate that behavior of starting, stopping under pressure, going back into the correct thing, but never taking it from their mind that they shouldn't do that thing. They're like, well, this is just a thing that I do. This is the cycle that I go through. And if that results in progression, i.e. like we still continue the session, we keep carrying on. You imagine in my specific example here, I'm healing, the dog bounces out, bites the decoy. Maybe I give him a pop with the prong collar. Maybe it's the electrics, whatever it is. And then he bounces back into the heel position and I just keep healing. That's the thing that the dog goes, okay, well, we kept making progress. Like that's part of the things that we can do. I bounce out, I scream and jump back in and away we go. We keep going. Now, the type of dog that will do that, that's a specific kind of dog, but that trait is possible to exist in all dogs depending on what it is that they're trying to do. Like what is the behavior that we're trying to get rid of and not have them do, punish, and what is the alternative that the dog is potentially understanding itself being driven into. We use that example. It's a very sport dog example, but it's very clean and people can understand it. That's not the only place it exists. This exists with things like fence fighting and stuff like that, right? Like when the dog's running up and down the fence barking at something and you stim it and it runs back to you. That's like demonstrating an alternate behavior. And because people then go, well, the dog is no longer fence fighting, you cannot continue to apply an aversive. That can create the exact same situation where the dog looks and goes, okay, well, when you're around, if I fence fight, all I have to do is run back to you and the pressure will stop. Or if at the opportunity to fence fight, I don't want to do that and I want to avoid the pressure, I just stay with you. But then you've taught an alternate behavior of being with you rather than the dog having a real understanding of not doing a particular thing. And so if you're not there, the dog can't stay with you. And so therefore it will either go stress crazy because it doesn't know how to escape the potential punishment that's coming or how to avoid the potential punishment that's coming. Or it just goes, I can't. So away I go and I continue to do the behavior. Both of those are terrible outcomes that can really mess with a dog. When you're then trying to punish, like punishment, we know that variable reinforcement schedules strengthen behaviors. And so a variable punishment schedule is only a variable reinforcement schedule, right? Like if the dog is doing something that it wants to do and we're trying to stop it in one way or another, and if we're intermittent in how well we can do that, then you're variably reinforcing it because the dog's typically doing it because it gets something from it. And so you're actually going to strengthen the behavior. And then you're going to get a dog who
Well, you're desensitizing. That's the problem, is the dog goes through a desensitization cycle. It just goes, you're not really punishing me. You're attempting to, well, I don't even know what you're doing. You're just yanking on this device, but it's really doing nothing. It's something that I can sometimes get, sometimes not. Therefore, I can push through when it happens. And that's how we can end up like hardening a dog to the point where tools of aversion no longer work, right? And that the dog is like, well, this is an activator. This pushes me harder to do the very thing. And if it gets to the point where I can't handle it, I know how to stop that. And that's how you run out of aversives that you can ethically use. And we observe that kind of all the time. People have done that with dogs all the time, where through not wanting to give the dog a truly aversive experience that the dog understands as punishment and therefore will no longer do the behavior, from not wanting to do that, you can run out of the ability to do that by slowly and incrementally hardening the dog to the aversives that, if they were just used at a more intense level initially, would have been effective and remove the problem and that behavior from the Rolodex of things from the dog. So that is a very 50,000-foot view of the conversation that's happening, I think, and where people are getting kind of confused about it and a little bit lost in the weeds. But there's a lot more to it than that. Like I said, I've drawn my understanding of punishment from all the people I've trained with. Of course, a big influence on that is Ivan's course. It's where I really was like, yep, I have a much better understanding. But then
going back through old footage that I had of me training with other people and learning from them and sort of understanding what I didn't get in the moment, but they were demonstrating to me perfectly, but I just didn't pick up on what was happening. I wasn't ready to learn it in that moment. So my understanding of it just drawn from a lot of places. And like I say, I have a whole course on this that I invite people to do. The links to my school will be in the show notes and stuff, but I'm not trying to drive you to do that. I'm trying to sort of give you that high level understanding of what's going on here and why there's a variance in this conversation that is happening. To me, punishment is not in and of itself some horrible thing. And I think that that's one of the things that this conversation being in the zeitgeist currently is further reinforcing for many people who already felt that way, is that we're kind of on display a little bit as being, these people shouldn't be allowed to use punishment. Look, they're fighting amongst themselves even as to what it is, right? And how it works. If there's no actual understanding of that, should they even be allowed to do it? That's, I think, the bigger picture sort of conversation that I'm quite concerned about currently. But that's my 2 cents on it. That's how I feel about it. That's my explanation for it. And I think that sort of is suffice to have people understand it, not necessarily do it.
There's a couple of good Easter eggs that you dropped in there. You're talking about doing the course with Ivan and your understanding of it. And I've often thought about this over time because I feel that the best explanation is probably the easiest to understand and it makes complete sense to you. Whenever I've had something really well explained to me, because there's other times where I've had people give me an explanation on something and for some reason I just go on living my life and thinking, oh yeah, that made no sense at all until somebody comes along and they really take the time to break it down. And it might be that they've incrementally staged it so you kind of following the bouncing ball and you go, yeah, that makes complete sense. Or they've pragmatically got you involved in it where they've said, hey mate, you do this, then do this, then do that. And the reason you do this, that, and then this is because it all follows a logical sequence that can't be denied. You have to do it in that order. And then you go, oh yeah, that makes complete fucking sense because somebody dedicated and delicately took the time to explain it to you. But it also, to you, it made sense, which is the point that I was trying to make before about your comprehension about reinforcement and punishment. There's been plenty of times in my life and people that I've spoken to where I've said, you know, how did you feel about that? And some people where I think that was horrendous. How did you feel about that? And some people go, oh yeah, just laugh about it. That was so ridiculous. Another question I wanted to ask of you before when we were talking about this and we were talking about dog types, is there or has there been a time in your life that somebody has been incredibly capable of getting into the commandos, like they can do everything, but they shouldn't have been in the commandos and everybody knows it?
Yeah, for sure.
You were using examples of dogs like that before, and I was thinking to myself, well, there's probably been times where you know, like in something pinnacle like the commandos, and people might be out there going, ugh, and having a bit of a groan about it. But in reality, it is, you know, like in Defence Force, when you're in SEAL teams or commandos or something like that, like you're not just on the level basis. Everyone plays their part. I understand that. But there's also tiers of trajectory where you go with that as well. And if you're going into pinnacle, anything, whether it could be career or whatever it is, sometimes there's people who are completely capable of making the transition to be there, but everyone knows this fucking person shouldn't be there. Or it's the same with a dog. Sometimes you'll have a dog that's completely capable of doing a sport or something like that, but you're just thinking this dog's a fucking monster. It's just a wrecking ball that really, you know, it was probably better off mauling people in a prison or on a street than it is in being in a sport ring. It's just not the right type of dog for it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so it does relate. So, you know, I worked at the school for 2 years. I instructed on 2 full reinforcement cycles. I've instructed on plenty of selection courses, but 2 full ones where I selected and trained the guys all the way through. And I can tell you, and I had with a former chief of army, I actually had something of an argument about this, was that one of probably the key attribute to be suitable for service in any form of special forces is an acceptance of personal risk well beyond normal. And the problem with that then is if you do not have that, you cannot do that job. You probably won't even volunteer for that job, right? But you have to have an acceptance of personal risk well beyond what most people think is okay, right? Or how most people would live their lives. So that means these are guys who are going to drink drive. These are guys who are going to fuck up on the piss. These are guys who are going to leverage themselves financially in stupid ways because they are willing to accept a level of calculated risk. This is not dumb risk either. This is they do the calcs. And when a normal person looks at something and goes, okay, well, the cost benefit analysis is this, doesn't stack up, I'm not doing it. The type of person that is suitable for that kind of job looks at that situation and goes, yes, it does. That does stack up. That is an acceptable level of risk. I accept that. Right. And so therefore going to do that. Now, that's exactly the same as what we want from a really cool dog. Right? Like, that is exactly the same thing. I want a dog that's like, no, I'm going to fucking go through that fire. Like, I want that. I absolutely want to do that. Like, I'm prepared. I want the ball. It's on the other side of the fire. I don't give a fuck about the fire. I want the ball. I'm willing to endure that. And there's a sweet spot, you know, because like there's a point where it gets to the point where you're like, oh, you're not calculating it anymore. Like, you don't perceive the risk. And that's where you see, like, with certain people, they get to that point where you're like, could you just, like, I get that you're awesome at this job, man. Like, I get that you're really good at this, but could you please stop fucking up? Could you please do some, like, in your personal life? Could you please, like, not get engaged to every woman that you meet? Like, that's one of the key things. Like, the amount of guys I know who, I have a friend, I've been to 4 of his engagement parties. You know what I mean? It is, he doesn't weigh the cost benefit analysis. He just goes, I'm in love. We have to get married immediately. Right? Not like, hey, maybe get to know this person a little, spend a little more time here, you know?
Let's talk about the person, though, that has all the capability, all the intelligences, all the physical prowess to be able to do it, and then has the belief that they can do it, and then gets over there and realizes, oh, no, I can't. I think probably that was more comparable to what I was talking about before, is that there's plenty of dogs that I've seen that people have convinced me that it's on the trajectory path, that this dog will, you know, blow through in whatever it could do, whether it be in law enforcement or in sport dog.
Yeah.
It shows all the hallmarks, and you would say, yeah, this dog is measurable to get to these outcomes. And yet the dog reaches it and goes, oh, I don't like this. I don't like the intensity that comes with it. And I feel that if I had to rephrase my question, if I didn't ask it right, that was probably what I'm referring to within your capacity. Have you seen those type of people who they're physically superior? They're intelligent people, but once they hit the actual boots on the ground in a different country where there's real gunfire and real bombs going off, and we're not playing make-believies anymore, we're playing realsies, that they go, oh, fuck, man, I didn't know that this is what I got myself involved in.
Let me choose my words carefully, but I've seen a couple of people, it happened when I was in the army, you get people who realize they can't do it and make all these kind of excuses. And certainly, like, at an example, one deployment I was on, we'd just arrived in country, and the night before we were going outside the wire, someone from the other, like the SAS FE, one of their SIGs, got killed the night before we were going out for our first time on that trip. Like, you're in country for 10 days or so before you actually go outside the wire.
Yep.
And then CP, like, there was a guy who was like, oh no, I'm not going out. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, that would be a reality check right there. That's the sort of the real slap in the face where you go, holy shit, this is real. So
I've seen that. And then twice, like, I've seen that in quite a few people, and that can accumulate over time. You know what I mean? Like there's certainly people who I've seen that have done heaps get to the point where they can do no more. That's a real thing as well. But what I've seen twice is someone completely go catatonic, like where they were like, no, I can't do this. And they couldn't even say that. They're just not capable of performing. The first time I had a really hard time coming to terms with that, because I needed that dude's fucking help right there and then, and he couldn't give it to me. And the second time, I was the voice of reason to someone else trying to get him to help. And I was like, he's gone, man. Like, there's nothing you can do. We leave him. We have to go win this, and we'll come back for him later, because I've been here before. I've seen that. He is not going to recover from that shit. Like, keep moving. It's crude an example that's the same as like a dog being run on the field kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this, they happen for the same reasons. You can get a dog that gets too overwhelmed, a dog that is really good at doing the thing and gets too overwhelmed, too many decisions, don't know how to make it, too many consequences, weighing in, I make no decision and I don't do the thing. I've seen that, and we've seen that play out in the real world. But then you also get dogs that are like, nah, no way, fuck this, I'm out of here, and completely out of it. And that's sort of how my equivalent of the person going catatonic, like they're just not suitable. I think one of the tricky things that we face with dogs as well as with people is like we try and do a lot of training that inoculates to stress, but you cannot replicate real stress, especially battlefield stress. You cannot replicate that. We try really hard, but you can't. Like there's a certain flavor in the air for real stress that is different from anything that you can create in order to try and test, I think.
Yep. There's another very relevant point that you brought up before, which made me think about when dogs are in different states. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is they're in altered states of behavior, whereas it's not a baseline dog anymore. We talked about this several episodes ago when I made reference to Ladybug when I could see her in pain and the difference, like the different state of mind she was in, how out of body she was at that point in time. And I think that's comparable when you see dogs in a drivey state, and especially high-end drive, dogs that are very predatory motivated or have an understanding of the decoy is there or the opportunity is there and I want to get it, or even a dog that just wants to chase the car. They're in a different state of behavior. They're in an altered state of behavior. And there's times where people who have got a little Bichon Frise or a little Cavoodle or something like that, and they can be drivey little dogs, don't get me wrong, they can have it, but they shouldn't be your executioner when it comes time to discuss these types of behaviors. And I often find out that the media is made up of a lot of these people trying to come to terms with what happened, why a trainer did something a certain way with a completely different type of dog. The way that you would deal with a Boy Scout is completely different the way you would deal with a Commando, if that is comparable. Yeah. The same should be said for certain types of dogs and breeds and, behavioral states as well. Mate, there's been times where I've watched and I've seen people talking about the state of mind that the dog is actually in at the time when people believe that they've punished the dog and they've done a form of punishment. And I don't think the behavior stopped. I just didn't think the behavior had any opportunity to continue on. And therefore, in the eye of the beholder, the people who were observing or the person involved in it thought, I've done something about this. The dog has stopped the behavior. But as we know, behavior is only something that we can bear witness to through seeing it actually unfold. Like it's a visual thing. I can see the dog doing it. I can see the person doing it. But that doesn't mean that you're not rehearsing it or replaying it or waiting for another opportunity to happen inside your mind. I know myself that there have been times where I've said to people, I'm not going to do that again because there's a behavior going on, but I have every fucking intention of doing it again. I'm stewing on it in my head thinking the minute this motherfucker turns their back or something, whatever it might be, I'm going to take the opportunity. I'm just going to stop it now, but at some other stage, I'm going to put the hammer down and do this. I've seen dogs do that before, where if people have seen me correct a dog before and then they've seen me correct it again seconds later and they're going, hey, man, that wasn't fair. Why did you do that? And I said, because the dog's contemplating doing the behavior again. You just don't have the skill set to see it unfolding. I can see it. It's been years in the making, but also with the mentorship that I've had and the amount of dogs that I've trained, I know this dog is rehearsing doing that behavior again. I want the dog to say, yeah, man, you caught me. Okay, I was thinking about it. I'm going to stop doing it. Now, you could be fucking hung for that. There are people who go, oh, I don't buy into that, man. I don't read into what you're saying because you don't understand it. You haven't been involved in it before. You haven't seen the dog relax after the second time it got corrected where it goes, yeah, okay, you caught me, fair and square. I was rehearsing it in my head. It was cycling in there. This has dissipated it. Let's move on to something else, shall we? And you go, cool beans. We will move on to something else because, mate, you and I have talked about this. Most people have talked about this. Sensible people that I've talked to and held audience with, and I've listened to them seminaring or whatever they're doing. Most people agree. We don't want to linger on the correction or the punishment side of it. It's just, unfortunately, and also fortunately, it's a part of learning. It's just a part of the cycle of learning and understanding and comprehending what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what I get away with, what I can't get away with. And then you understand, all right, let's focus on the things I'm allowed to do and I can get away with. Let's not focus on the things I'm not allowed to do and I can't get away with, because it's been made abundantly clear that this doesn't really improve my life my comprehension of life, my understanding, my settings. This just doesn't make things get any better. All these other things do, though. These open up doorways of opportunities, and I can do these things. I'm not missing out. It's when you're stuck in that fucking reciprocal cycle of thinking I'm missing out if I don't do this. And that's sad. That's terrible when I see a person or a dog stuck in that mindset. And I really fear it could be genetics, but more often or not, it's just led down to poor training. It's somebody who's either desensitized it in the past and they've just let the dog think, yeah, this is not really punishment. I'm hung up on this behavior. I want to do it. The juice is worth the squeeze here, my friend, and I will pursue it. Mate, it's always a sensitive topic. It always has a degree of tenderness. You're going to be before a jury of people who don't understand it and they've got the wrong types of dogs and they don't understand that altered state of behavior of their dog either because their dog never displays it. And they're going to be the person who is going to sentence you. And that's the most unfair and the most ridiculous part of this argument is that jury of your peers is not a group of people who have any experience in it whatsoever.
Yeah, 100%. Mate, I think that's like we've said it all, but one thing I just do want to hit on briefly, you've worked security, right? Like I think this is one of the things that can help people understand that punishing before the event. You would have many times seen someone hard staring someone and been able to go over, tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey man, don't do that. If you do that, I'm going to have to boot you. I can see where this is headed. Don't do it. And you can have that conversation with them. And I'm sure they don't like that conversation, but you can convince them that what they're about to do is not going to go the way that they want it to go. If you don't catch that moment, stopping that fight is a very fucking different event, right? Like you can't have that conversation because you then, once the fight begins, the arousal is different. At that point, you're in management, right? As a security guy, when the fight in the bar, you're just trying to not have the fight in the bar. The chances of you being able to decrease the frequency and likelihood of the next fight is very low, right? And what you would have to do in order to get to the point where the dude who is the instigator of that fight, what you would have to do to him in the fight to make him not want to fight again in the future, he's going to have to be hurt. There's going to have to be a consequence from which he's like, fuck, that went really badly for me. I can't or won't do that again in the future. Whereas if you get in early at the hard stare or whatever and you go, hey man, don't do that. That's not going to go the way you want it to go. Let's move you over here. Let's separate this. Let's not have that happen. In terms of humans, like no one would argue that that's a thing that a good security guard would do at an event, right? Like everybody hears that and goes, yeah, you try and intervene with that. But then when you say, no, I could see that dog hard staring the other one, right? Like he was trying to start a fight.
Exactly.
And I was able to like via my relationship with him go, hey man, knock that off, right? I could give him a tiny, like on his flat collar, I could just jolt it just to get his attention. He looks at me and I'm like, hey, I see where this is going. Don't do it. And then he goes, yeah, okay, I won't. That still counts as punishment because I'm going to isolate him a little bit. I'm going to provide a little bit of an aversive and then I'm going to sort of talk him down. But once the dog then fights the other dog, I'm just trying to keep everyone safe. I'm not going to make it less likely for him to do that fight again in the future because the window has closed on that. Right now, I'm just trying to keep everybody from getting hurt. I can't have a learning moment. And I think thinking about it that way can help people reframe the idea of like, yeah, you can punish a dog for not yet doing the thing that it's planning to do. And in fact, you probably should. Like the moment that you can determine via prior learning, via experience, that you can go, oh, I see where this is headed and I don't want it to head there. That is the time to intervene. Don't wait for it to fucking play out. Like get to the point where you're sure it's going to happen and then don't let it happen.
Mate, it's easier to put out a campfire than it is to try and extinguish a wildfire.
Exactly. Fucking exactly. Anyway, I feel like we hit it. I feel like we've done it.
We have.
That's it. Another episode, Canine Paradigm.
Yep.
As always, if you like what we hear, like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from. Then go somewhere else, do it there. Go and check. You can write as many reviews as you want, anywhere you want. As long as they're good, that'd be
That's helpful.
Yeah. You prefer good reviews? I mean, you have to follow your heart, but I prefer good reviews. If you want to support the show, best way to do that is jump in on Patreon. A few bucks a month to get you a giant backlog of information.
The Patreon's floundering at the moment. It's floundering.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
We haven't
it's floundering.
Work into it.
Yeah.
I need to get some more gear stuff into there. I would love for you guys to tell me what you want from me in there. I've put a bunch of different stuff and I get different feedback. So you tell me what you want and I'll make it. If you want to support the show, another good way to do that is to jump into Teespring or Spring. There's links in the show notes. That'll get you the ability to buy some cool merch of ours. You get some like t-shirts, wall tapestries and all that kind of stuff.
Socks.
If you want to get in touch with us, big socks, underpants.
Yeah, all that sort of. I don't know if we've got underpants, but.
If you want to get in touch with us, probably the best way to do that is jump in the Facebook discussion group. We'll always have a look in there before we record and kind of go, all right, what's going on? What are people talking about? What do people want us to talk about? So that's a great place to be if you're interested in influencing how the show goes. But if you want to contact us directly, you can shoot us an email. We are info@canineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.
We did it. We got the right soundtrack at the right time.